So today I want to go ahead and dive into some ideas for how to lay out content of, let's say, maybe you've got between 30 and 50 words worth of content. What I'll do is I want to share some ideas for how to think about the different layouts, and then I'll share some live examples from some real websites in terms of how you might see these things kind of play out in real life. So when you're sitting down to think about content planning or you're thinking about layouts on your website, one of the first things to think about is how much content do you have and how do you want to break it up? So one of the things that we see in general is that people try to put way too much content into landing pages, particularly landing pages that are designed to kind of capture attention and move someone to another phase of the funnel. Now, if you're doing a long form sales letter or you've got a service page, we've got a lot of content. We'll cover that in a different episode. So this is really the case where you've got kind of a general website where you've got some information about some services and you're trying to move someone from one place to another. And we'll dive into some details there. So the couple of things that you're going to want to think about as you're thinking through how you might lay out different kind of content is, first of all, how much content do you have and how many sections is that going to represent? So for example, if you've got about 50 words and it's kind of it's going to stand alone, maybe you've got an intro to a row or a set of features. Like that's a single instance, it's a single column, that's probably going to be fine. But maybe you've got 3 or 4 different features and you want to make sure that you've got that alternation of, an alternating set of rows about, describing or communicating those different features and some of the benefits associated with them. And so that might be multiple sections worth of content. And again, I'll share some examples here. Second thing you want to think about is what visual assets do you have available to yourself? Do you have images? Do you have icons? Do you want there to be a background image or a background video? If so, make sure that whatever it is isn't so overpowering that you can't actually read or consume the content. Third thing is, what do you want the alignment to look like? You can always align left, right, or center. And again, depending on the number of columns, you might have different approaches to that and the amount of content. And again, we'll dive into that in a second. The fourth thing is how many calls to action you have and how are those going to be displayed. Fifth thing is how many columns on a desktop device you might want this to be laid out in. Typically, you would see 2, 3, or 4 columns kind of max when it comes to about 50 words. When you get into 4 columns, though, when you've got roughly 30 to 50 words, it can start to look really, really cluttered and really, really busy. And so I typically suggest no more than 3 columns if you're going to go all the way out to 50 words, 30 to 50 words worth of content. And then on mobile, how does it stack so that when someone's looking, columns go away essentially on mobile devices. So keep that in mind as you're thinking through how you might lay out some of this information and which assets you would append to a particular, layout. So the way I've broken this down is by columns. So let me zoom out here. We've got a 1 column, 2 column, 3 column approach. There's a bonus accordion approach, which I'll get to in a minute. And then we've got some live examples we'll dive into so you can see how these look in practice. So let's start with the simplest use case. You've got about 30 or 50 words worth of information. Maybe you're using this as the beginning of a header to a section, or maybe this is the header for a page, right? Maybe you've got a service and you just want to have a 30 to 50 word kind of lead that's going to kind of sell the service. Typically, that you're going to have that in a centered 1 column layout. Now, you might be able to go left or right, depending on how the page is being structured visually. But probably the most common paradigm is going to be single center, right down the middle. Now, you may also add an image below the call to action. Typically, if you've got a section, a 1 column section with 30 to 50 words where you are usually you're going to be introducing a section. There might be an instance where you've got the image above it, but generally speaking, that's not going to be the case. If anything, you're going to add an image or a video below the call to action. Another modification you might make to this particular approach would be to have 2 calls to action. One that's kind of takes you maybe more to the bottom of the funnel, maybe one that's more top of the funnel. But in the 1 column approach, it really is kind of a very simple, here's a headline, here's 30 to 50 words, here's a button, maybe 2, and maybe a graphic, and that's it. Second approach, you start to move into 2 columns, and typically with a 2 column layout with 30 to 50 words, you're going to have a headline and then you're kind of 30 to 50 words on either the left or the right with an image or a video on the left or the right. And so the most common way you would see this laid out is, let's call it starting off, since we read left to right, you would start the page with content on the left, 30 to 50 words, and an image on the right. But then in the next section, you might switch them so for visual interest, so that way somebody is able to kind of scan really quickly or skim really quickly, and the images are kind of breaking up the flow, and their eye then gets drawn to the copywriting as they're skimming very quickly. One thing to make sure you're doing is, if you have 2-column layouts, again, you want to make sure that you're aware how they stack, so that, do you want the image to go first or the content to go first? Typically you would see content, image, and so being aware of that flow is really helpful. But if your image is particularly descriptive, maybe you're selling software, maybe you've got an app or something, you might do image, content, image, content. So it's really going to depend on whether or not the image is, how much it reflects the content that you are trying to make sure somebody focuses on. Remember, it is images get people to stay and scroll and linger, but it's the content that gets them to click and engage. Okay, so some modifications on the 2-column layout: you might put the image on the left or the right. You might use a video instead of an image. Maybe you have a second call to action next to this button here. Maybe you've got an icon above the header. Maybe there's a pre-header above the header, which maybe is just 2 sentences, or maybe even 1 sentence, or even 1 word. And you would see this typically like an alternating left to right pattern. Next approach is a 3-column approach. 3-column approach, and you can already see here, when you start getting into 3 columns, 30 to 50 words starts to look a little cluttered. And if we added a 4th column, it would just compress all this even more. And so typically what you would see would be something like maybe a prefix, a headline, and then some content with a call to action. Here you probably would not see more than 1 call to action. You already start to see that things are getting a little bit cluttered in this space here. Now you can clean it up a little bit by removing, by keeping it even shorter. So maybe instead of 30 to 50 words, you go closer to 20, and then you add an image or a video above the headline. But then you want to make sure there's enough white space between the elements so that someone can skim very quickly and kind of see, kind of exactly to the content. And you want to make sure the image is congruent with the content. Now, maybe what you've got is a single image that's powerful, and you've got a heading, and then maybe you've got 2 bullets. And so you still have 3 columns, column 1, column 2, column 3. But here you would have maybe a little bit more description in column 1 and column 2, and you use column 3 just for an image. And so this layout's a little different than these others, where you got content, 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 content. Here you have content, content, image, okay? And then, of course, you could alternate this by putting the image on the left side, shifting the content to the right. Maybe you add a call to action to the section, or maybe even a call to action to each column. Maybe there's an icon there. But the basic idea is that 30 to 50 words, when you start getting into 3 columns, 4 columns, it's too much. So you want to pare back the content and start to use either your typography, as in this case here, or images to draw visual attention to the area you want somebody's eye to focus. Now, a 4th approach would be to use what's called an accordion. You've probably seen these before, where you click on the button and it expands or contracts. And the nice thing about an accordion approach is that an accordion, you can actually have the content be arbitrarily large. So an accordion is even great if you're going to have 50 or 100 or even 200 words. An accordion can be a really nice layout for putting a lot of content in a small amount of space. And so accordions, I think, are underused. They're typically used mostly for FAQs, but what you're seeing in a lot of really kind of nice designs now is that people are using them for features and are able to put a lot more content in a feature, describing a feature inside of an accordion, and they look really, really nice. So what does this look concretely? So if we come over to this site here, this is for the events calendar. This is a WordPress plugin that helps people with scheduling events on their WordPress site. We don't need to go into details. The thing I want to showcase is you can see now how these layouts kind of make sense relative to the way that that the page has been set up. So generally speaking, each section is about 30 to 50 words, maybe a little bit less, but about 30 to 50 words. And you can see here, we go side by side. We start off with with the 1 column, 30 to 50 words here with a call to action. Here, these guys use the image modifier. So there's an image right there. Then we move into a two-column approach. Now here they went image on left instead of image on right, which also is fine because there's so much visual interest here. Although I still would probably have put this on the left versus the right, but again, they know what they're doing. They're doing a fine job. And so here you see the two-column layout, image on left, content on right. This is probably not more than 15 words. So, but they could have taken this to 50 words and it would have still looked okay. Scrolling down here you can see they use the accordion. And again, this is what I mean by people using the accordion in a particularly creative way. Instead of using this for FAQs, they've got the different types of ways people might use this particular plugin, and they use an accordion to be able to expand and contract that area without having to have somebody scroll too much. Down here, they get into the three-column layout with an image above, right? So this reflects that three-column approach with about 30 words, in some of these, maybe a little bit more in others. So event tickets and community tickets have a lot more. But here you can see now we've got that three-column layout, image, headline, content. Here they went left justified. So there's the alignment component as opposed to going center justified, but a very kind of simple three-column grid, image, headline, 30 to 50 words. And then down here they have the call to action, not call to action. They have the frequently asked questions, which is how, again, you see accordions typically. And then they've got, instead of going two-column here, they just went one-column accordion. And then here they've got, again, a two-column image on right. And in this case, they don't have a large image. They constrained the content within a narrow column, but it's still a two-column approach here. Content on left, image on right. And so you can see in this website here how this layout is really just a series of rows with these different kind of, how this page is a series of rows with these individual kind of layouts that are, really kind of mapped to common paradigms. Coursera is another example, and it won't go into as much detail here because we're already running a little long. And here you can see they really lean into the two-column image on left or image on right paradigm almost for the entire length of this course. So they start off with, the entire length of this page. So they start off with content on left, image on right, one call to action, right? And then let's skip these for now because we haven't talked about really short content or graphics yet. And we then go image on left, content on right, image on left, content on left, image on right. And so this is just an alternating image, content, content, image, image, content, content, image. That is the same layout, just flipped back and forth. Now, in this particular one, they've got the two calls to action. And in the other ones, they don't have any calls to action. They're just trying to get you to skim and scroll down to the bottom. But here you can see that the layout of this is very simple. What gives this visual interest is the quality of the graphics that they put together, and that becomes the visual interest. It's not the layout, it's the visual interest. And then the content themselves is, about 30-ish words, maybe 20 for each one. But again, you could go up to 50 words in this layout, and it's not going to look funky. It's going to read just fine, and it's a pretty common what I would say a utilitarian approach to design. And again, you see that in both of these sites here, which are both very good websites. You see both of those paradigms playing out of kind of the one column, two column, three column, and here's how the content gets laid out. So as you're thinking about your own web design, these call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if we count that accordion ways of displaying content. You could build entire websites just using one or two of these elements, which Coursera essentially did, and this one did. I mean, these guys are using only two of those elements. These guys are using a couple more elements, but you can build an entire website with very few elements if you're kind of thinking about the content and you're restricting the and you say, okay, well, I've got about 30 to 50 words. I know about how many sections I want. I want to include this kind of content. Again, we'll do a series at some point on copywriting. And then you just say, okay, well, these are going to be the kind of layouts I want to use. I'm going to go 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. The biggest challenge, though, is going to be making sure that you've got the appropriate graphics that map to these individual project. So hopefully you found this helpful as you're kind of thinking about your own web design project. And these layouts here are helpful ways for you to conceptualize how do I organize content in groups of, one column, two columns, or three columns based on the images, icons I have available, and whatnot. So if you found this helpful, please take a second to like and subscribe. And if you know someone else who would find this helpful, please do them and us a favor and share it with them. And we will talk to you later. Bye.